The December air in Montgomery, Alabama, carried a quiet chill, the kind that hinted winter was just around the corner. It was December 1st, 1955, an ordinary Thursday for most of the city. Work whistles had blown, school bells had rung, and the hum of life pulsed through the streets. Buses, painted white on the upper half and dark on the lower, rattled along their familiar routes, ferrying tired workers, mothers with groceries and children with satchels. On one of those buses, a seamstress named Rosa Louise Parks sat in the colored section. She was 42 years old, not young enough to be dismissed as naive, not old enough to be excused as fragile. Rosa was tired, yes, but it wasn't just the tiredness in her legs from sewing all day at Montgomery Fair, the department store where she worked. It was a deeper exhaustion, the kind that sank into her bones after years of living in a world where her very existence was weighed down by rules designed to humiliate her. The bus driver that evening was James F. Blake, a man Rosa knew well. She had clashed with him before. Years earlier, Blake had thrown her off his bus for refusing to enter through the back door after paying her fare at the front. She remembered his face, ruddy, stern, and always itching for a chance to assert his authority. As the bus filled up, Rosa glanced at the world around her. White passengers claimed their section at the front, leaving the rows behind them reserved for colored riders. But the rule was cruelly simple. If the white section filled, black passengers were expected to give up their seats. Rosa sat in the first row of the colored section, behind a wooden sign that marked the division. She wasn't breaking any law. She was following the rules, unfair as they were. Then came a moment. A group of white passengers boarded. The front filled quickly, and now, the bus driver turned toward the row where Rosa and 3 other black passengers sat. "You all better make it light on yourselves, and let me have those seats," Blake ordered. The 3 passengers beside Rosa reluctantly stood and moved. But Rosa stayed put. She looked out the window for a brief second, as if weighing her decision against the dim streetlights flickering across the glass. Then she turned her gaze forward, calm and steady. "I'm not moving," she said. There was no shout at her voice, no drama, just a quiet firmness. Blake's face flushed. "I'm going to have you arrested," he barked. "You may do that," Rosa replied, her voice unwavering. In that instant, the bus seemed to fall silent. The white passengers leaned forward, curious. The black passengers stiffened, aware that the smallest act of defiance could spark violence in Alabama. The sound of the bus engine hummed beneath their feet like a heartbeat about to quicken. Rosa Parks sat there, a seamstress, a wife, a daughter of Alabama, facing down a system that demanded she know her place. She knew the danger. She knew black men and women had been beaten, jailed, even lynched for far less. But she also knew this. There was no reason she should have to stand so a white man could sit. When the police arrived, the December night wrapped its arms around the scene. Officer Day and Officer Mixon entered the bus. They didn't ask many questions. They already knew the script. Rosa, with quiet dignity, allowed herself to be arrested. She did not fight. She did not plead. She stood, stepped down the bus stairs, and walked into history. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it was only beginning. While Rosa sat in a jail cell that evening, word began to spread across Montgomery's black community. E.D. Nixon, a longtime activist and head of the local NAACP chapter, got the call. He had been waiting for a moment like this, a case, a person that could ignite a movement. Rosa Parks wasn't just anyone. She was deeply respected, educated, soft-spoken yet strong-willed. Unlike others who had resisted bus segregation before her, Rosa had a reputation that would command sympathy and respect. By midnight, Nixon had posted her bail. Rosa returned home to her husband, Raymond, who feared for her safety. He knew what happened to black folks who challenged white supremacy. But Rosa's eyes told a different story. She wasn't reckless. She was ready. The next morning, Montgomery buzzed. Churches whispered about what had happened. Barbershops echoed with the story of the lady who refused to give up her seat. The tale grew with every telling. Rosa's small act of defiance had lit a fuse, and in living rooms and basements across the city, leaders began to meet. They plotted not just for Rosa's case, but for something larger, a boycott of the buses themselves. Montgomery's buses carried more black passengers than white. Maids, cooks, janitors, and laborers who made the city run. If they refused a ride, the system would crumble. But would people be willing to walk miles to work, day after day, under the hot southern sun, just to make a point? Suspense filled the air. Would fear crush their courage? Would the white establishment strike back with violence? Would the movement die before it even began? At the center of it all was Rosa, a woman who had not planned to be a symbol, but who had become one anyway. And somewhere in a quiet Montgomery church, a young little-known pastor named Martin Luther King Jr. was about to be asked to lead a cause that would change not just Montgomery, but the entire world.